So, Mr. Netanyahu, for the last 15, 20 years that you've been, strolling around calling Israel the only democracy, that amount of times that we've heard that, the amount of times that you guys have used that against the people that are trying to just fight for Palestinian rights, the amount of times that you guys have brought that up. The only democracy, the only democracy. If you're here saying that for the last, 20 years, this has been unchallenged and that there wasn't a democracy, or that the structure that was put in place was undemocratic, then on what basis were you guys making the claim that Israel was the only democracy for the last freaking 50, 30, 20 years, whatever, how long it's been that you guys are making that claim?
What you're pushing for is a form of autocratic rule, where the one remaining check and balance on your power as Prime Minister is just evaporated, and you ultimately can then determine judge selection, you can determine what laws pass or don't pass. You become the overriding autocratic leader, as they have in many countries where there are genuine autocracies, of the kind that you talked about in 2012 in that speech.
You keep repeating these shibboleths and these...
Because you keep dodging them, my friend.
I made Israel the most liberal country.
Oh, did you?
Among the most liberal countries on the planet. I liberalized its economy, turned it from a straight, jacketed socialist economy to a free market economy that benefited the entire people. I brought in investments into the Arab sector more than all the previous governments combined. I'm very proud of the fact.
Yeah, he brought investments into the Arab sector. Which one? Was it the Palestinian one, the one that you're bombing on a regular basis, or the one that you're stealing from, or the one that you're exploiting, or the one where there's a bunch of people living there that have no say over their lives, or who's representing them, or who's ruling over them, or whose military is driving through their houses or kicking in their doors? Is that the Arab world you're talking about, or maybe it's the other Arab world? I don't know. I'm losing track now, Mr. Netanyahu.
My party, I nominated to be the Speaker of the Knesset, the third highest position in the country, and he was elected not because he's gay. He was elected because he's
Oh, of course he brings up. It's funny, man. Honestly, it's just so funny. If you want to win over the hearts of the Western world, you want to prove how democratic you are. I know how to do it. Just mention something about somebody being gay. Oh, that one guy that I took a photo with that one year at that one time at that one event, and I helped him cross the street, and he was gay.
As some third world autocrat is ridiculous. I believe in the balance. I'm a classic Democrat with a small d. I don't want to get into trouble with my American friends, but I'm a classic believer in the balance between the three branches of government. That's what ensures democracy, and it's been thrown off balance in Israel. We have to bring it back. It will not give any power. I do not select.
What happens when the
I do not select the judges. In fact, they'll be selected by a composite committee. It's not important right now, but
it's not important right now. Yeah, no, it's not important right now. Don't worry about it. I don't select them. I hire a few people and I tell them, hey, you better select who I want, and they select them for me.
That's just so. If that were the case, I don't see any democracy that has such extreme powers of the Supreme Court as in Israel. There's no such democracy. So are they not democracies? Are they dictatorships?
So wait a minute. So does that mean that Israel is not a democracy? So if Israel is unique in its democracy, so Israel has its own form of democracy that no other democracy across the world has. So does that mean Israel is not a democracy? But I thought it was the only democracy in the world. And the fact that he was saying that this has been going on for 20 years, meaning he was prime minister for a majority of those 20 years, and this was happening. So if he's looking to reform it now, this was happening before. It wasn't reformed before. This was the status quo before. And before, for the last 14, 15 years that he was prime minister, he didn't seem to have an issue with it. He would always speak about how Israel was the only democracy, even back then. And so if it was unique in its democracy, in its democratic structure, then on what basis was it a democracy? If the court and the judges, they had so much power, and it was so authoritarian by the court system, then on what basis was it a democracy? So Mr. Netanyahu, for the last 15, 20 years that you've been, strolling around calling Israel the only democracy. That amount of times that we've heard that, the amount of times that you guys have used that against the people that are trying to just fight for Palestinian rights, the amount of times that you guys have brought that up. The only democracy, the only democracy. If you're here saying that for the last 20 years this has been unchallenged and that there wasn't a democracy, or that the structure that was put in place was undemocratic, then on what basis were you guys making the claim that Israel was the only democracy for the last freaking 50, 30, 20 years, whatever, how long it's been that you guys are making that claim? On what basis were you guys making that claim? And so if you're looking to reform it and establish a democracy where there's checks and balances and equal government and equal madrishino, then at that point, okay, you can then say it's a democracy because you've established whatever the democracy that you're looking to establish, which is, it seems like it's a wolf in sheep's clothes. But anyways, we'll play the devil's advocate, literally the devil's advocate, and we'll assume that he's actually trying to establish a democracy or reform the democracy or the so-called democracy. Then for the last 20 years, what was it? Why were you telling everybody that it was a democracy for the last 20 years? These people, they speak and they speak and they speak so much, and that's how you deal with a liar. You just let him speak. You let him speak, you let him speak, you let him speak, and you listen carefully. And eventually he's going to tell you the truth, because it's hard to lie. It's hard to lie, especially for these idiots.
When you are trying to take some power away from any branch of government, and in this case from the judiciary, they don't want to take it away. Right now you have a situation where 15 unelected members of the Supreme Court effectively govern Israel. They can decide things that affect our military, our economy, our foreign relations, our battle with terrorism. Is that right? Is that democratic? No, it's not democratic. You want to correct it. Israel is...
So wait. Okay. So there's 15 people right now, according to what he's saying, that decide what you guys are going to do with the military, how you guys fight terrorism. 15 people. So you're telling me for the last 75 years that Israel has been a country with this system in place. There's been only 15 people that have been dictating what happens to Palestinians, that have been dictating what's happening to the Lebanese people, to the Syrian people that are getting bombed by Israel, to the Egyptians that were getting bombed by Israel. So you're telling me for the last 75 years, this so-called democracy has been led by a group of 15 people. He's saying it himself. I'm not saying this. There's been 15 people that have been dictating what happens with their security, with how they counter terrorism, with what happens with their military. So you're telling me that this so-called only democracy of in the Middle East has been dictated by 15 people? Because that completely goes against your entire narrative of Israel being the only democracy in the region. And you're either a democracy or you're being ruled by 15 people. Anyways.
It's a worrying time for Israel with America, because for the first time in polling history, a majority of Democrats in America now have more sympathy for Palestinians than they do for Israelis. There's been an 11-point swing in the last year alone. That must concern you. And what also must concern you, more people aged 18 to 29 now view more sympathy with Palestinians than they do Israelis. What's your response to that?
Before you respond to that, Mr. Netanyahu, the Democrats in America are not any better than the likes of this individual here. They don't have a bigger heart. They're not better people. They don't have a good conscience. They're not pure. They're not loving. They're not caring. They could not care less. They don't care. All right? The credit goes to who? Goes to the people. Public opinion has changed, has shifted, and they're at a point where in order for them to be taken seriously, they need to stand in alignment with the people. Historically, they weren't standing in alignment with the people, and that was okay. People would just let it slide. They're like, what are you going to do? America and Israel, they're BFFs. You can't get in the way of that. But now that the Palestinian movement has grown in strength, it's gotten more organized, there's a lot of people that have gotten involved, a lot of intellectuals that have spoken up, people like Norman Finkelstein, people like Noam Chomsky, they are the ones that should be credited. It shouldn't be these few Democrats that are now suddenly, subhanAllah, gaining a conscience. It's the actions of the Palestinians themselves, first and foremost. Before any of the academics, before anybody else. It's the actions of the Palestinians themselves, the organizations, the Jewish communities, like Jewish Voices Against Israel. And you have the academics. And then you have the general masses that are starting to realize that they can't be lied to anymore. We live in an information age. Information is readily available. They cannot control the narratives anymore. And so public opinion is shifting. And we're at a point now where people are able to see the truth. They're able to see past the deception, the propaganda, as he calls it. When public opinion shifts, the politicians, these little monkeys that dance for us, they have to start changing their tunes as well. And so now we're at a point where it's no longer acceptable to ignore this issue. You cannot come to me and talk to me about I'm an advocate for human rights, like these Democrats always do, but then say, well, I'm an ally of Israel. You can't do that anymore. So that's the reality of it before Mr. Fartface gets into it.
I think I've looked at other polls, but
I've looked at other polls. Wow.
You can never deny the
I looked at bank statements, and we have some. We're working on some things, some transfers. I mean polls, not banks. I'm sorry.
And they do consistently.
But that's got to concern you, hasn't it? That poll.
You look at it and you say one thing. America's changing not vis-a-vis Israel. America's changing vis-a-vis America.
But one of the reasons
and you've often said that.
Well, yeah.
But America's changing vis-a-vis America, and therefore it changes vis-a-vis Israel. But I think the main bulk of the American public, by the way, across the political spectrum, a wide berth of the political spectrum, support Israel because they see Israel as...
nor the young ones, 18 to 29.
Well, there's a question of where that goes and whether this pendulum doesn't swing back.
One of the reasons is they cite a lot of them
about it like it's a stock market.
Your
close
relationship with Donald Trump. They think you really pivoted to him. You described him as the greatest friend Israel's ever had in the White House.
And then he betrayed him.
I said Israel had no greater friend in the White House. That's true.
He said Israel had no greater friend in the White House. And then what does he do after? He betrays him. He turns his back on his own great friend. So my mom always told me something. My mom, wise woman, love her to death. She always told me, if somebody is willing to betray their friend, they're willing to betray anybody. So this guy, Mr. Netenyahu over here, was willing to betray his great friend, the greatest friend to Israel. He was willing to betray him, Mr. Donald Trump. And I mean, the betrayal, that's what Donald Trump said. Donald Trump said he felt he was betrayed by Israel. So if he's willing to do that to his greatest friend, if he's willing to do that to his people, may God protect, may God help the Palestinian people that have to live under the rule of this guy. May God help them. And only God can help them. Because there's no international community, there's no United Nations. We've been waiting on them for ages. We've been waiting on them for ages. And wala shay, nothing. Empty pockets. We come back empty-handed. And so only God can help them when they're dealing with the likes of this guy. The devil in human form.
I try to tell him we should go to...
Well, he wasn't happy when you tweeted your congratulations to President Biden on winning the election.
Maybe not. But what I...
Well, he was extremely... If you don't mind me, I don't want to use a profanity in front of you, but he was heard on tape saying that it was the ultimate betrayal. He hadn't spoken to you since, and bleep him, he said about you. He then added, Bibi is Bibi. Bibi didn't want to make peace, never did.
Right. Well, I did, actually, with his help.
I did, actually.
A breakthrough peace, the Abraham Accords with 4 Arab states. It's a trend that came back is to do 2 things. One, block Iran's quest for nuclear weapons that aims to destroy my country and threaten every other country. And the second thing is to expand the historic Abraham Accords.
Wait, I just want to understand. Threaten every country. They just signed a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, right? Or not a peace agreement. Okay, I'm exaggerating. It's not a peace agreement, but they opened diplomatic talks with each other, which is crazy. Which led to Saudi and Yemeni with the Houthis, peace talks with them. It seems like Iran is only a problem to you, my friend. And so it's funny how his problem. So I have a problem with the fact that my court system is coming after me for criminal violations. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reform the court system, not for myself, for the sake of Israelis. Iran is a problem for me in my country. But I'm going to, impose harsher restrictions, harsher soft war tactics upon them, not for the sake of myself, but for the sake of everybody. So, I love, this guy, man, he's so selfless. He cares about others, he cares about the world, he cares about his neighbors, the people around him, his neighbors that he's bombing. He cares about them so much that he just drops bombs on them. Maybe he wants to, help them with their excavating a little bit. He wants to dig for them. You can, where the bomb lands, you can build a house there. The foundation is already, set. You just pour the concrete. He just cares so much about everybody. He cares so much about everybody.
How did you feel about Donald Trump having dinner with Kanye West and the white supremacist Nick Fuentes?
That was horrible.
Two people who dispute a lot of anti-Semitic
I thought
stuff.
it was horrible, and I said so. I think it's a big mistake. It's wrong. It's wrong.
You said to
from
him.
every point of view.
You said to him, hold up. You thought it was wrong and you said to him. Who'd you say to? Did you say it to Kanye West? Because you just told us 10 seconds ago that you never spoke to Donald Trump.
Have you spoken to Donald Trump since that?
He wrote me a note.
What did he say?
He congratulated me on my victory.
Did he?
Yeah.
He wrote you a letter and that was it. So when did you speak to Donald Trump for you to say that to him? Unless you're saying you spoke to Kanye West. Then I would say, why are you speaking to Kanye West? I thought he was anti-Semitic. Did he say all that stuff about Hitler and whatever? So why are you speaking to Kanye West? Wallah, bro, why do you lie, bro? Why you always lying? Why are you always lying, bro? Why?
But basically, people say there's trouble in the world. I want to blame the Jews. We have a setback here or a setback there. Blame the Jews. The communists say the Jews are the capitalists.
Or you can blame
the
Hamas.
The Jews are the communists. Blame the Jews. So that's a
honestly, my friend Netanyahu. That's how the Palestinians feel, because every time there's something, every time you do something to the Palestinians, who do you blame? You blame Hamas. Oh, something's this is Madrish Nosara. I killed 17 children. Hamas. Oh, you know what? I accidentally blew up that hospital. Hamas was there.
Prime Minister. There have been 88 Palestinians, 15 Israelis killed so far this year. It's the highest rate of deaths in 2 decades. Many are saying that a lot of this is down to incendiary rhetoric from some of your right-wing members of your government, and they particularly cite Bezalel Smotrich, who earlier had called for the segregation of maternity wards so Arab and Jewish newborns would be separated at birth. He's now in charge of the civil administration of the occupied West Bank. Last week he said, who was the first Palestinian king? What language do the Palestinians have? Was there ever a Palestinian currency? Is there a Palestinian history or culture? Nothing. There is no such thing as a Palestinian people.
I think that there are a lot of statements that he made previously that he walked away from.
He walked away from it.
Something he said to her.
He made the statement,
in any case,
put it down, and walked away from it.
They're part of my government, but they're part of my government, and I decide policy.
So do you distance yourself from comments like that?
There are many comments.
When he called for the Palestinian town of Awara to be wiped out?
Of course not. Of course
Of course not. The Freudian slip.
He corrected. But wait a minute. Be fair to him. I don't know if it was 20 minutes later or 30 minutes later or whatever, or a few hours later, he said, "I was misunderstood. That's not what I meant." We don't.
How do you get misunderstood about something like that? I want to wipe out a village. You guys took it out of context. You guys misunderstood.
I go after the terrorists. I go after those who support the terrorists. But I don't believe in collective punishment. I also think
you don't believe in collective punishment. So explain to me, Gaza. My G. Explain to me, Gaza.
Are involved in terrorism came from the Palestinian side, and the weakness that we have here is the weakness of the Palestinian Authority that doesn't send its security forces to stop the terrorists. And therefore, we have.
You know, it's funny because he wants to talk about terrorists. Let me do a little bit of a history lesson on the IDF, which are still to this day the biggest terrorist organization known to man. The IDF, before it was the IDF, it was actually a group of militias. It was the Haganah and the Urgun. They were both terrorists, realistically. So initially it was the Haganah, and then a couple of the Haganahs were like, yeah, you know what, y'all ain't terroristing hard enough. So they're like, we're gonna, take ourselves and we're gonna create our own little organization. They created Urgun. And in Urgun, it was a militia. They were deemed as a terrorist organization. They were labeled as a terrorist organization up until the conception of Israel. So they were never unlabeled as a terrorist organization. Their most notorious crime was the King David Hotel bombing, where they actually killed British people, they killed Palestinians, and guess who else they killed? They killed Jews. So these were terrorists, the Urgun and the Haganah. So that's all I'm gonna watch for today. I gotta say, the interview overall, I was pretty impressed with Piers Morgan's questions. It wasn't like the Jordan Peterson interview where he just sat there and listened and didn't challenge a word that Netanyahu said. If I was a betting man, I would bet that it was still rehearsed. He definitely prepped them on what the questions were gonna be. At the end of the day, this is the Prime Minister of Israel, the king of manipulation and deception. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, because I sure as hell did not. But until next time, thank you so much for watching.